Oh, you failed on that particular jumping, skip roping challenge, Kirby. Oh, I'm very sorry for you, my friend. Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Piglet here once again, and I'm back for some more yet again for the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii. So last time we actually did manage to fully completely done with the forms of Hot Land and able to actually just manage to collect every single part of it, including treasures, in addition to those medals as well. In addition to that though, we also managed to able to briefly done through by the forms of the Sea Keys hide and seek challenges. So today for this episode, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that we're going to be taking on one of my favorite worlds of the entire game, Treat Land. Not just because this is the third world in the game, but also it comes in a different variety of level themes, which even then, take this first level for instance, the forms of toy tracks. This usually makes it more accurately a toy themed. And when we get to the later levels, then the level themes might actually differ for once. So even then though, yeah, this is the reason why I'm looking forward to able to visiting this world pretty much, because even then, it does add a lot of variety in them, which even then, well, there's only one exception, which we'll get into that in during the next video, but for now on though, we'll just have to concentrate onto the forms of toy tracks for a little bit. So, yeah, I guess there's not much else I can say about today for this point, folks. Today was actually forms of the 6th of September, 2018, so I forgot to tell you about this and during the likes of the last video, is the fact that recently that Nintendo has finally been recently announced there's gonna be a proper Nintendo Direct. Because even then though, that ever since about a month ago, that we did have a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Direct during about a month ago, and I'm really looking forward until when the next Nintendo Direct is going to show up and during later down today, even though it's going to be able to show up in the forms of 11 o'clock during the night. But obviously I can't tell you, I really honestly can't tell you what the forms of the new details is all about up until whenever we get to like let's just say the next couple of challenges up ahead, or even especially noticeable when we get to the next video, because, well, since this was already being uploaded and during the likes of in 6 o'clock and stuff like that, in the forms of how we factor in the UK's time. But even then though, that sometimes that different countries' time zones usually differs, but in forms of any other parts for this matter, but I digress. So, yeah, very looking forward to the next Nintendo Direct actually offers, even though, rather than just actually focusing on, one or too many things, unlike the forms of, oh shoot. That was my fault. Anyways though, rather than just mainly focusing on just one thing at the middle portion of the video, or in this case, at the very end of the actual point itself, that, unlike in the forms of how it does it in, well, let's just say in March this year's Direct, in the forms of the 8th of March, that usually focuses on most likely some of the modes or some of these features in the forms of Mario Tennis Aces and all that stuff. And most of the time though, we got ourselves the 3DS and Nintendo Switch titles has been announced with. So, and I could assuming that, oh yeah, that could be also the same applies for the last year's September Direct, which usually focusing on the forms of, well, most likely Nintendo 3DS titles and Nintendo Switch titles, but even then though, they actually did manage to save Super Mario Odyssey at the very end of the Direct. So, I don't think that's going to be the same case this time around though, because it's mainly going to be showing case of the forms of whole bunch of game titles coming out by the forms of the very end of 2018, all the way up to the next year, which is the forms of 2019. So even then though, expecting games like the forms of the new Yoshi game and stuff like that, Bayonetta 3, and or even Metroid Prime 4. I don't know if Metroid Prime 4 is going to be on there at the moment, but we'll see what happens there until whenever I discuss on you guys about that, until we're able to actually get to, like, you know, most of the challenges, because I'm going to explain more on the levels themselves by any means, but even then though, yeah. There's that nice little rubber ducky right there. Kinda cute though. And, yeah, I really do like this level though, especially noticeable how the fact that this is the reason why I'm really looking forward to visiting this world pretty much, from not just during the likes of my own time, but also during the likes of the actual Let's Play of this game as well. So even then though, that makes it very obvious to see how this will turn out to be. So, That I digress though, and a few things I just want to explain also is the fact that recently there's actually another new update in the forms of Sonic Forces Speed Battle for the, well, let's just say the smartphone's application. Every now and then they're actually gonna be, you stupid waddle dude. Oh, I hate you. I think I wasn't paying attention to that. I think that's the reason why. Recently, they're going to be adding in another new playable character in the actual game itself, but this time is another one of those Babylon rogues in the forms of Wave the Swallow, ever since during the likes of Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games for both for the Nintendo 3DS and especially noticeable for the Nintendo Wii U. So, even then though, that I'm assuming that once again, I believe Wave the Swallow, if I'm guessing it correctly, it might actually gonna be able to actually bring her the hoverboards, just like how it does it for Jet the Hawk. So, I guess that makes it very obvious there, because obviously Babylon Rogues doesn't usually run that much, other than, well, obviously Jet the Hawk from the forms of Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games in the football event that he did manage to run at least. But I digress. If you manage to able to fix that Teddy's foot, then it will actually give you even more beads, in addition to that star bead as well. So how nice is that little cute little bear? Oh, that's so lovely and cozy. But I digress, here we go with the forms of another transformation, and of all the other transforms we actually come across into this game, I will admit though, this particular transformation is actually one of my least favorite transformations in this game, I will admit though right away. Just because, first of all, as you can see, we actually transform into ourselves Train Kirby. And the basic controls for this particular transformations will work is the fact that we need to able to actually aim at the screen, and then you can able to actually see the actual main cursor. And what you can do with it, with the actual pointer cursor, is the fact that you can able to draw some of these lines, or in this case, draw some of these little parts in the forms of the rails, which even then, think of like the forms of Thomas the Tank Engine and stuff like that, except, well, we're actually going to be playing this on the Nintendo Wii games, so even then, you can simply just turn opposite directions from pressing the B button, which I think I'll give this transformation some credit for. But there's one problem I have with this transformation, unlike in the forms of every single transformations in the game, is the fact that I found myself it's very hard to control this thing sometimes. Even especially noticeable whenever you're trying to able to collect something like the forms of, like, let's just say treasures, and especially with train carts and stuff. And, yeah, we got ourselves a CD right there. And, yeah, as you see these little, you know, carts or trucks, this is what I like to call them. Because I remember watching Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends back in during the likes of when I was, like, very, very young. But I've no longer watched them because I'm growing older at this point, and I wasn't interested with the forms of the new series. I have some nostalgic spotty forms of the old seasons, most notably in the forms of, well, obviously Season 1, 2, and, I will give some credit for, Season 5, though. Ah, shoot. Why do I always keep mess things up with the forms of this particular part there? Ah, jeez. But I digress, though, and I always have a fun time when I was, like, really, really young, watching myself the forms of Season 4, because of the narrow gauge engines and all that stuff, which, even then, that's just how it is when it comes to nostalgic back memories, but in forms of, when I was, like, really, really young. But I digress. Enough about this little, jibby jabber, so let's go ahead and toss this particular hammer patch all the way to this point here. And as you can tell for that notification on this loading screen, we can now actually access to the next level in the forms of the Seekies hide and seek challenges. So, and when we can actually access to in this level, we have Mushroom Run. So, we're about to get started for this point, so even then, wow, most of the levels themselves are going to get a little bit more longer as far as this time goes, but I digress. Now, for Mushroom Run, this level reminds me of the forms of the level from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, in the forms of Mushroom Hill Zone from, not just from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, if you manage to able to actually count for an add-on stuff, or in this case the actual lock-on technology from the Sonic and Knuckles game, but also by the forms of Sonic Generations for the Nintendo 3DS, because even then, Mushroom Hill Zone also makes it introduced into the forms of Sonic Generations for the 3DS. but the forms of the actual classic era. Which, even then, that makes it very obvious, because even then, as you see, you can actually interact with every single mushroom platforms, as you can see there. And especially noticeable, you can able to actually time your jumps well enough and to able to actually get yourselves enough bounce height. So, that's the thing I loved about this world, because it has, like, again, a whole lot of different environments and stupid little... Are you kidding me? I wasn't paying attention. I think it's because of how the fact that, much like in any other Kirby games, is that the enemies once again still respawn every time you actually exit off screen. Or even especially noticeable whenever you're trying to get back into that current screen you're going to be able to carry on with. Which even then, I will admit though right away, is a kind of annoying experience, but apart from that though, it's not too much of a big of a deal in my opinion, just because obviously, you don't have health points or anything like that, and especially noticeable there's no extra lives, so mostly you can get hit as many times. Well, the only time you need to be very careful though is the fact that if you want to able to get every single gold medals in this game, I suggest you're able to do a no damage run, because if you do not manage to get the gold medal, if you do not collect enough beats for it, well, you're not going to get it. So, it's kind of like how it does in the forms of the Super Ghouls and Ghost on the forms of the Super Nintendo. Whenever you're trying to get access to the forms of the final boss, the true final boss in that game, by the forms of Emperor Persadius, spoiler warning by the way, and the only requirements to actually able to actually face off against with Emperor Persadius in the forms of the Super Ghouls and Ghosts game is the fact that Princess Prin is trying to tell Sir Arthur managed to able to actually claim the actual like the bracelet, and if you don't get the bracelet or the powerful bracelet, then you're not going to face against with the forms of that particular Emperor Persadius. But even then though, the only way you can able to get the bracelet is that you need to be able to replay the game twice. Well, at least you can able to actually do 2 playthroughs of the game, like the forms of, well, kind of like how it did in the forms of, like, I don't know, Ghosts and Goblins for the NES, even though that game was super punishing for most of these gamers out there. Especially noticeable how the fact that, well, you know. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of mushroom obstacles all over the place, even with the bouncy mushrooms, just like the ones in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles Mushroom Hill Zone, in addition to the new Super Mario Bros. DS game, like the forms of level 1- I would say level 1-5, which I think that's another example of that. But even then though, yeah. So, again, not much else to tell for this point, folks, but I'm, again, really excited by the forms of the next Nintendo Direct has been going to be up. In fact, it's been about, you know, again, a month ago, ever since during the likes of in the forms of the Special Direct, by the forms of the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Direct, that it actually did reveal some awesome stuff, like the forms of the new fighters introduced, including Echo Fighters as well, like the forms of Simon Belmont from Castlevania, and Richter Belmont from Castlevania Wanderer of Blood, because again, there's a good reason why I've managed to able to obtain my copy of the forms of, well, Castlevania Wanderer of Blood for the Nintendo Wii back in during at the very beginning of 2018, because every nowadays you can no longer get the game on the Wii's Virtual Console now, because, well, that shop is now closed for at least forever now. Which is kind of sad, because I really do miss this channel, because even I know that was definitely one of my all-time favorite channels in the forms of my Nintendo Wii console, so... But even then, that's just how I think it is. Because we move into the next generation of consoles, I can assuming because we're going to be able to move on to the eShop shops. So, that's pretty obvious. So, yeah, for the most part though, as you can see, I've got myself not only all of the treasures, as you can tell right there, but also we've managed to claim ourselves the gold medal, as you can see right there. And now let's go ahead and reach the very end of the level before anything else will happen. So even then though, we'll just have to see what happens there. And, you know, you get the drill for this particular level. You're going to be spending most of your time just trying to bounce all over the place. And, especially noticeable if you commonly know how the fact of the matter is though, you can able to actually just get a crap ton of bees if you manage to able to... No, ah, god dang it, I will admit though right away is that when you're trying to fall down to the actual vertical climb, it can get pretty annoying at times if you manage to mess up with your platforming department, but if you manage to get back up, no problem like I do, Oh, look at that, 1981. Does that number seems to be familiar to you? By the forms of the release date of the forms of Donkey Kong for the arcade machines and also Mario's appearance. On his first appearance on that particular arcade game, or in this case back in the day, it just calls it Jumpman, and then later on Shigeru Miyamoto managed to able to, well, name Jumpman called Mario, for his Italian plumber. So there we go folks, that concludes our Mushroom Run. A very fun level actually, because, you know, we're going to be spending most of the time just bouncing all over the place on these mushrooms. You can actually perform yourselves a little bit of a weight to this, because even then though, you can able to bounce this thing ridiculously high. But anyways, now we've got ourselves a cake patch, and this way we can able to actually unlock another new level. And this is usually inspired by the forms of the actual world's name. By the forms of Treats Land, because we're gonna get a lot of treats, because we're gonna be exploring through Sweets Park. This level also reminds me of the forms of the final level in the forms of the original Rayman game for the original PlayStation/PC in the forms of Rayman Gold, as what's known for the PC version of Rayman 1, and also by the forms of the Sega Saturn version of Rayman, the original game. But I've usually found that game to be extremely difficult, even with World 3 and onwards, that the difficulty spike can get pretty darn aggressive at times. But I digress. So this is how you should expect it. Sweets Park, it's a full lot of sugary stuff, like the forms of sweet cakes, biscuits, and especially with the forms of the yummy puddings, which I don't know if you noticed, but at this point folks, I found most of the actual food in this particular level. It also reminds me of the forms of the level from Sonic Colors from the Nintendo Wii/Nintendo DS in the forms of Sweet Mountain, and at the same time, this level also reminds me of the forms of the level from Sonic Lost World on the Wii U version most likely. It usually just calls it Dessert Ruins Act 3 because the 3DS version does not able to contain the food, food-based level other than, well, Tropical Coast Act 3, or in this case Act 2 even. So, now I apologize if my voice is going a little bit more, downgraded for me, because I haven't really drank lots, because even then though, that's only because of how the fact that, well, if you manage to do commentaries on YouTube videos and all that stuff, sometimes my throat gets really worn out so easily like this, which I can understand why, because of how the fact that, well, if I manage to talk too much, then I can able to actually just to regain my voice again. Or perhaps it's because I recently managed to set up by the forms of the upcoming events and during the likes of next month. I'm just simply able to actually just waste my breath trying to able to blow this particular inflatable balloon, which is kind of a weird choice for me, honestly. But even then, though, other than that, though, I managed to able to actually did that no problem whatsoever. And this is kind of cool. It's all squishy liking, and in fact, this particular obstacle does remind me of the forms of, you know, one of these what are these puddings are called, I wonder? Let me know in the comments below of what these little puddings are usually called, where they usually comes out from here. And you can also manage to able to demolish them when you're able to ground pound it, and then you can able to actually just keep on moving forward for the most part. So yeah, that's what I can say about this level though. In fact, the majority of the levels themselves, in the forms of this world in particular, is just amazing because of the music, atmospheric, or in this case, just the atmosphere of the forms of that particular level itself. It's just very beautiful as far as the actual levels goes with the forms of Treat Land. But that doesn't even compare to the forms of the next level after this level anyway, because well, you'll just find out until we're able to actually proceed to this game. So, or even for this matter, for this particular world, because even then know that, because we've only just got started with this particular world so far. So, anyway though, no sign of the forms of the returning of the forms of Cap King 74 just yet though. Because the reason being for that is because, well, I haven't really seen him ever since during the likes of a couple of videos back. Ever since in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I did not meant to kill that Waddle Dee over there just because of that star beat. But oh well, I might as well pass it. So, anyways though, Because of that though, his subscribers counters keep on decreasing now into the forms of 36. Because even then, because I heard from several people out there, they think they might actually just most able to actually just think that this is totally unoriginal. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm presuming that's what most people think. But even then, we're just consuming for that much. So here's the forms of that next treasure we need to be able to claim though, and basically for suggestions for this section right here is the fact that once again we're going to be transforming to ourselves Mole Kirby ever since, you know, the cool cave. But this time we're gonna have to be very clever about this because it's almost like a puzzle section of it almost. And basically all it does is basically we need to able to figure out the correct staircase pattern. And then once you deal with that, think of like the pyramid or the forms of the actual like, you know, the 10... I don't know what you would call that formation, I'm gonna have to admit though. And then as long as you're able to be smart enough, then you would able to go back in that section again, but this time with the normal version of Kirby. And then you would able to actually climb all the way up to the top. And in that way, you would able to actually claim yourselves the next treasure. So speaking of which, we have is the dessert chest. Now, I believe if you ever play this game in the North American version of the game, you usually just calls it dresser, because, obviously, another reason why this game is, you know, delayed in UK in 2011 back in the day, because they want to able to edit up most of the text to able to make it a little bit more British accent. So, that's how it usually goes. So, I don't honestly mind, or even none though. But in forms of actually back in the day, that is, that I don't mind how this game got delayed in the forms of 2011, just because of how the fact that, well, I'm usually most likely excited about Mario Sports Mix first of all, and then I'll save Kirby's Epic Yarn for later down the road in the forms of back in 2011, and I think I really don't mind of actually letting the game delayed in 2011. Back in the day, because they want to able to work things out with the forms of the British accent, with the forms of not only narration, but also for every single, like, let's just say some of the treasures for the most part though, so even then though that I really don't mind about it too much. So anyways though, let's go ahead and go down here and claim ourselves the star bead, and I believe we're almost pretty much done with the actual level, other than these couple of rotation platforms there, and we're pretty much done. Oh wow, I haven't got every single, like, ending plates and stuff like that. Oh well. No, whatever. I'm guessing that if you manage to aim for 2 stars, you manage to get yourselves, like, 200 beads. And yeah, I was right about the actual, like, claiming the actual beads reward system with the forms of the actual ending sequence, because you get... I'm pursuing 500 if you're most able to aim for that red plate, and the 3 stars you get is the forms of 300 beads, and finally the 2 stars actually claims you 200. So there we go, that concludes Sweets Park, and let's activate body forms of that. I'm assuming that might actually be a lollipop patch. Oh yes. This is without a doubt one of the best levels in the entire game, at least in my opinion. Melody Town. As far as this level applies, is the fact that we're going to be able to do a lot of musical elements, and because of that, we'll jump in right now. In fact, this level also reminds me of the forms of the level from the original Rayman as well, but there is no difficulty curve. And because of that though, in the original Rayman game, in the forms of the musical-based level, you have to deal with a lot of slippery physics most of the time, which can be very difficult when it comes to, like, you know, hardcore platforming and everything. And also, this level also reminds me of the forms of the level from Sonic Advance 2 for the Game Boy Advance on the forms of Music Plant. And that game also has the forms of the actual musical aesthetics here and there as well. And also by the forms of, you know, the board from Mario Party DS in the forms of Toadette's Music Room. I kinda wish that they just wanted to make a musical theme board in the forms of, in Super Mario Party almost. But I don't know exactly for sure just yet though, because after all, we've only got, you know, 29 days left until the actual game finally coming out on the forms of the rest of the world anyway. I'm hoping that game doesn't delay though, unlike the forms of how it does it back in, like, let's just say, Mario Party Island Tour, at least in the European version of the game, especially noticeable with the forms of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker for the Wii U version in the European version, and especially noticeable by the forms of, like, let's just say, I don't know actually, but even then, I think that's what I can come across to think of, but I digress. Oh yeah, that could be, yeah. So yeah, this level's so awesome, because basically you can able to actually interact with every single musical instruments, like the forms of these drums, and especially these harps, as you can see there, which is very, very awesome. Especially noticeable with the forms of, like, pianos that you can able to run into. And even you can able to actually collect the beats from the forms of the musical notes, which is very, very cool. Out of all the levels we're going to be run into in the forms of Trees Lands, this is hands down one of my favorite levels in the entirety of the actual, not just for the actual world, but also for the entire game as well, because you can able to actually interact with the forms of, like, you know, different musical instruments, which is very, very surprising. And, oh, by the way, if you go down here, you get yourselves a Cleaf Tree. So, I'm presuming the American version does have a different name for that treasure, although I may be wrong about that, but again, I must research on that after this video anyway, because, well, I think that's about time for me to able to actually think that this level might actually be the last level for this video for me. Then after we're done with that, then we can able to move on to the next boss in the game, and also some couple of secret levels here and there as well. And for the most part though, after this world has been entirely done, I'm actually able to take a break from the main quest from now on though, because I'm actually going to be coming back for certain challenges coming up. Because after all, we've actually continuously unlocking more of those levels by the forms of the Seekies, you know, hide and seek challenges, and I believe also some other friends we're gonna have to invite over. And yeah, because of that though, I'm actually gonna be saving up for the majority of the adventure at the very end up until later, because even then, since we've only just got started with the actual forms of itself, and right there's the actual accordion. Because of that though, we need to be able to use the accordion, specifically this accordion right there, and because of that, we need to get that final treasure. And in fact, my timing is a little bit off there, but we'll try that again. Which, thankfully, I've managed to get this in a successful attempt now, and we can able to get the CD for it. Man, I really love the aesthetics about this particular level as well. Even then though, especially with the forms of, there's tons of musical notes all over the place every time you actually decide to interact with the actual instruments itself. Overall, it's just a very, very pleasant world to look at, even by the forms of the actual Nintendo Wii standards. And, Goodfield does have a very, very awesome job with this, even especially noticeable with the forms of, you know, other games like the forms of Wario Land, the Shake Dimension, or in this case in North America, Wario Land Shake It, and especially noticeable with the forms of Yoshi's Woolly World for in 2015, or in this case for this matter, Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World for the 3DS, and including by the forms of the upcoming Yoshi game for the Nintendo Switch entering in 2019, which should be next year. So, in fact, I'm also able to actually go ahead and tackle for the forms of Wario Land the Shake Dimension, and I missed that note. If you get all of the musical notes on that section right there, you get yourselves a star beat, by the way, in case if you want to get a highly valued beat if you want to go after them. But anyways, let's just leave this level. I'm really sad I'm gonna leave this level though, because this is easily one of my favorite levels in the entire game. And yet again, I still messed everything up in the forms of that particular special reward there. And right now we've got ourselves the forms of our next patch, which appears to be, after this result screen is done, we actually get ourselves the air pump patch. And what can we do with it? Well, we can just simply activate the actual patch and see how it happens. So let's go ahead and just toss that right onto here. Oh, I see, it just pumps the forms of the actual pumpkin, and because of that, it will actually lead us to the next boss all the way up. which I'm actually gonna do in the next video, because I don't have that enough time for it. So even then, we're gonna have to end things off at this point right there, I'm afraid, guys. So join me next time on Let's Play Kirby's Epic Yarn for the Nintendo Wii. Is the fact that we're gonna be taking on to the forms of the third boss in the game, which I believe is known as Squishy Me, which even then was kind of an odd name. So see you guys next time. Later, fellas.